Welcome to another video blog on mental health and caring from a carer's perspective. You can check out my blog site, which sometimes has posts on my thoughts about caring, mental health, reviews on events, and videos and so on, and other media. Now, on this video blog, I want to talk about an event I visited over at the University of the Arts, London. Now, on the 12th of December, on Friday, I went along to an event called PerPlexUs, which is actually a phrase, as a word actually, and it was linked to a master's called Applied Imaginations 2014 degree show, which defies myopic ideology and social infrastructures. And a little word of warning, there's a lot of deep art exhibitions that I'm going to just explain, in a sense, what I visited. Now, as mentioned, there was plenty of art exhibitions to view, and I also managed to stay for the talk by quite a few of the artists describing their projects and work that they have produced across the world using the power of collaboration. The talk was on how can creative collaboration save the world. Now, I don't know if you managed to actually have a view of my blog site. You might come across a blog post about the Edward Adamson collection talk on which took place at one of the cafes. I've forgotten the name. I think it's Beauty on Rennie. But if you can, feel free to visit that. But going back to that talk, I met a lovely artist by the name of Adeli Orkajada, who told me about her project on the masters that she was doing. Now, Adele told me about her interest, which was on yarn, a soft fabric which is mostly used for knitting. Adele told me about her philosophy on the fabric, about its texture, colour, and uses for yarn. I almost envied her passion for the fabric. She felt that this point of art can be used just for experiencing and healing others, which is perhaps one of the core aims of this video talk that I'm describing to you here now, really. So when she told me that she was having an exhibition over at the University of Arts, London, I thought to myself it would be great to go over there and check out her project. And also I wanted to even hear talk by Dr. David O'Flynn, because his emphasis is on basically on the same thing, how art can be useful for healing people. I felt the main emphasis of the show was how art could heal and help people recover and connect with each other. Although the PerPlexUs 2014 show also focuses on the students from the degree course asking questions which engage with many vital current issues and concerns. For instance, from the personal perspectives to the global, or tackling gender issues, youth and well-being, and so on. So anyway, as I approached Adele's stand, her exhibition was very impressive. I wish I had arrived a bit earlier to take things more slowly and examine the stall or exhibit even further. Now, each part of the exhibit told a number of stories and projects about the fabric, which again is yarn. Adele's focus for her project was, can yarn achieve recognition as a distinct material that connects us to emotion, culture and identity? Now, Adele then explained to me a number of projects. One being a storybook about different types of yarn, and the other being a journal, which is actually turned into a ball of yarn, plus yarn rings, which I thought were very interesting, very appealing. I was also amazed at the projects to do with dementia and the form of healing and connecting, where Adele took her yarn for patients to use. Some would just touch the yarn and felt at ease with the fabric, so they could just eventually just sleep with it. Another thing that interested me at Adele's project was that the yarn placed in bubble wrap. I was quite tempted to actually press and pop the wrap, but I thought it's best to leave it alone. Adele showed me the types of yarn on her exhibition and explained the properties and texture of yarn. She encouraged me to touch the yarn, and while she explained how it was nice to pull the string of yarn and to make something out of it. Now, unfortunately, Adele was very busy that evening setting up much of the exhibition and the talk on creative collaboration, which I'll talk about in. So I took it upon myself to check out some more of the exhibits, and I was hoping to hear more from Adele at the lecture theatre soon on, but before Adele rushed off, she invited me to touch and play with the yarn more and make my own thoughts about how the yarn felt. I also took the chance to go through her lovely stories about the pots of yarn on her store. So, what was the next exhibit that I checked out after viewing Adele's exhibition? Well, I came across an attractive set of colours which is placed near the wall, and this exhibit was the play machine section by art student Radhika Jobban Putra. Now, her project aspect was on this, which is basically how can art of self-expression reach a wider audience of children through play with sound and colour. Now, here is basically a small explanation from Radhika herself. Basically, Play Machine is a low-tech, creative, recreational and educational tool which combines both sound and colour, giving children the opportunity to freely express themselves. So I can imagine that quite a few children had visited the store and has played with some of the sections there. One of the things that struck me at the Play Machine exhibit was the messages on the wall, where a quote read out, "Through self-expression in play, children resolve conflicts, express outwardly what they are experiencing internally." And this is by Erickson, 1977. I also took note of patterns of the paint that were painted on paper up along the wall, as if it was done playfully without any particular form or structure being seriously thought out. But also, I noticed it was quite attractive to watch how that was painted on that type of paper up on the wall. I decided to take a memento of that exhibit, and I took a card that I was drawn to on how I felt play was actually unproductive, but in a good way. One of the installations I stopped at before I got to Adele's exhibit earlier on was done by Michelle Cutmore, and his project was on how can playing with personality help you play your cards right. Now, I was wondering why a large number of cards that being playing cards, were placed on the wall when I got to this exhibit. And this was rather perplexing. But when I approached to find out more information, the project explained that this was a grounding metaphor to help people know themselves better by playing card games to boost self-awareness. Here people can shuffle, split, and personalize their personality, and it was suggested the card game Rummy would be great for such a task. I then turned to check out a large section of exhibits in the middle of the hall, and I was drawn to an exhibit that was neatly laid out. And this project was called Work as We Play, and this exhibit was done by Selina Molina, and this project was on basically on how can gamification increase millennial employee engagement to the company. And this sort of reminded me of Google, as if employees were working for Google when they actually do create or work there. It's almost as if it seemed to be some sort of game, as if the boundaries between work and playing were merged. And I think this is what this project is trying to get at. Selenia emphasis on this section is how that work as we play is basically is an internet-based system wrapped in a ribbon of fun for employers to engage with the employees. I did not spend too long at this exhibit, but being an IT person, I did attempt to create a character of their laptop placed on that stall. I then moved on to an interesting section that looked to be called Sound Hanger, and this one was done by a student was named Kwan Hee Chow, and her project was on how can multi-sensory tagging enhance the shopping experience for the visually impaired. And here it's mentioned that when the blind or visually impaired pick out clothes, they know just basic information about material and shape of the clothes by using the sense of touch. Well, here this project provides a new shopping experience through hearing, transferring of colours of clothes into sound, plus giving experience to sighted shoppers. I quickly then glanced and explored the project to the right of me, and this was done by Don Gran Lee, which questioned how can we break down the barriers and generate the new film co-production possibilities between the UK and China. And I felt this was an interesting project which looked at how London is a global centre of production for the screen industry. And Dongren noticed that it was a good time for the Chinese film market to help develop fresh ideas. Soon I found myself at another stall where there was a phrase I recognised in the art world, and this is contemporary art. And here the artist Luja questioned, and this was their project on how can online and physical space combine art environments to promote and develop communication. And here this interesting project looked at the blending of the two elements of online and physical environments together, where art does not just exist on the internet. And I felt this project was attractive and nicely laid out. Now, as I looked around the large hall, and the hall was very large, I kept noticing a sign placed around the place. It looked to be almost tribal, or almost seems to be Far Eastern, I would think, like a Far Eastern symbol. I wish I'd actually asked someone what it was, or what it stood for. But I must admit the symbol was certainly perplexing. Eventually, I found myself attracted to another symbol and was interested in the word below the symbol called "Join the Resistance." When I stepped closer to examine the stall, I noticed it was completed by an art student, Jennifer Glenn, where her project focused on can a surrealist approach towards ecological messaging engage people to rethink attitudes and alter their behaviors towards the plastic polluted oceans. So okay, this was a very long project title, but I guess there are quite a few around. So what does this polymeric islands mean? I mean, what does the idea of plastic polluted oceans mean? Well, I read that this project is concerned with individual action and aims to show that action does count. In fact, it proposes that this is the only way in which change can come about, where one person changing one small part of their world again and again. And to be honest, I do like that. I spent quite a while looking at the polymeric landmark placed near the exhibition. The next installation, I was really impressed by the use of space and colour, and the closer I got to the display, the more I saw the message about the exploitation. A few steps away from that exhibit. Now, going back to the large sheet of paper on the wall, I didn't really know what my conspicuous consumption is or was, so I just wrote that I agreed with someone else's view. Now, out of all the stalls and exhibits that drew my attention, I think there was about 4 of them that got my main interest and that I enjoyed visiting. And one was Adele's stall, not only because of the art. With Adele, I noticed that she is art in some sense, and she speaks, the saying, not only talking the talk but walking the walk. I think she actually almost is a human yarn. She expresses her art without having to show examples, and she actually draws you in to try and understand her view on how her art and view of her art can enhance our world of perhaps what we've never noticed about the fabric. Now, going back to one of the exhibits that also was interesting to visit was a project called How Can Self-Acknowledgement Through the Help of a Psychologist Lessen People's Emotional Sufferings? And here this project actually asked if people were ever considered consulting a psychologist and looked at the stigma and embarrassment of those who are too afraid to admit this. And here this exhibition even has a blog to help raise the awareness of mental health, and I'm glad that there was an exhibition whose core aim was mental well-being. There was a few things about the exhibition, I've got to admit, that certainly did set me back in some sense, that I didn't fully understand or enjoy. I mean, I visited an exhibition and it seemed that maybe it was at the end of the day, I don't know, but the student was just too busy to explain their section. And yeah, they did apologise, fair enough, but it put me off from wanting to learn a bit more about it. And going back to Adele, on her exhibit, what sort of drew me to it wasn't just the art, but the artist. It's important to express and continue to express, but I realise we're all human and we can't please everyone. And I did, one thing I noticed is that, I suppose again it was at the end of the day, but it was hard to get some students to explain their work. They just didn't seem to be, well, a few of them just didn't seem to be by the exhibits. Some were, and I managed to talk to a few. One that impressed me was the time to explain her exhibit, which impressed me. She seemed tirelessly working to at least help people understand what the exhibit was about. And one of them was basically interactive, where it allowed people to tear off or cut off paper on the wall to reveal, I think it was cards on Chinese art. There was also a video of a young Chinese man cutting off some clothes from what I believe came from an ancient Chinese story. It was quite memorizing. Well, I visited a few more installations and exhibits, and obviously I could not visit all of them. And I'm sorry I could not mention any more artists, or that perhaps I maybe misunderstood some of the exhibits. As you know, with art, no one's going to view the same thing twice as with another person, or even agree with the artist. But all the stalls and exhibits offered something for the viewer, and I would say quite a lot of them were also interactive. You didn't just have to stare at them. You could engage with them. You could touch some of them, play with some of the objects there, connect with them. But now I want to move on to the next part of the PerPlexUs art event, which was held at the University of the Arts London. And this part was the talk about how creative collaboration can save the world. And we had several hosts at the talk, one being, I think her name was Kiwi, I'm not sure, who was happy to see people coming together and being creative, and where there were many ways making people think in a new light about art and how they can connect with art. The thing is that the aim is to be socialized, is to be socializing on a creative process and bring the community together through connection. And at the talk we got to hear from 3 students, 3 artists. The first being Adele, who talked about her different projects through a cycle of pictures, and unfortunately pictures cycled fairly fast, so I could not capture all of them. But basically this is the thing. Adele's projects basically on using yarn to make tangible network. Another of her projects was basically an unmake project, where I think a device would unmake old sweaters and then turn them into new sweaters to help aid in recycling and raise the awareness of recycling. There was also another of the project was focusing on an awareness champion, basically a person, I think it was either jogging or walking, who was knitting as they walked to raise awareness of dementia. One of the project's core aim was to share messages to the world, and I think the one I mentioned before was she had a journal which people had difficulty reading, so she actually stripped it and turned that into a ball of yarn, where mainly people could actually touch and still experience the ball of yarn as a story, I suppose. We then got to hear from 2 more artists. One talked about the use of the imagination symbol, holding workshops on the idea of recreation of the old, or I think of old classical art, creating art on cups to enhance the objects, projects portraying the art of history, and examining paintings of Maria Dubbin's Seahorse. And I'll talk a bit more about Mary Dubbin's Seahorse later on. And the last part of that section was, I think, from an artist who was talking about her section on arts, where her daughter helped her, collaborated with her on the FGM issue, that being female genital mutilation, and trying to raise awareness of that through art. She also was raising awareness of the waste of water and using art as a powerful mechanism to do that. Next we heard from the 3 artists at the panel, that being the first Regina Frank. The next one is I think it's Maria Dubbin, and the next was Jazz Razul. But first we got to hear the amazing projects that they've been working on. And if I start with Regina talked about one of the projects where she worked on an art piece for 28 days to emulate the workers on slave wage, perhaps in developing countries, and even, basically I would say, go so far to say even in industrialized powerhouses, where unfortunately we have workers on such a low wage. She talked about how she travelled around the world while using the internet as a digital information and looked for words that she felt she had a connection to. She also made a kimono out of her favourite text while over in Japan, and this was related to words that she was drawn to, that were powerful, that she just was connected to, and perhaps could use that word to be more creative. She mentioned she went to Atlanta to make an art on a game where no one wins, and felt that was an amazing experience of people contributing by using poetry. One project was interesting. It was actually a mushroom dress where mushrooms were grown on that dress and shared with others. Another interesting project was the use of sound, where she, I don't know if I can easily explain it, but she was covered in some sort of mould, and she cracked out of that mould and used the sound of cracking, also on fruit that she had there being cracked open, and painting with it. And the emphasis was how sound was an amazing experience for that artist. Another project was on the power perspective of painting a brush on the dress, and how the brush moves, but not us, not the artist. We then heard from Maria Dubbin, who told us about the experience she had when she was trying to explain to a big powerful company about a piece of artwork. But something strange happened when she tried to explain to them about this particular piece of art and how difficult it was to make this art piece. And the problem was that no one actually understood her. No one even gave her any sympathy in a sense of applause. It was just silence. So what went wrong? Well, Maria felt that she wanted to now be a part of the world. She wanted to resist the situation where there was just too much artist language, too much jargon. She felt she spent too long with other artists being closed away from the world and making art as how she feels it should be, and not having any connection. So her mission was not to be so private anymore and take her art studio out into the world, into museums and other places. And her art studio was actually taken into a hospice, And although, as we know, people die there, the project was challenging on how art would be actually taken into a place like that. But Maria was nervous about that interest. It was an experience, and it actually led to her finding out that being in such a dialogue with other people, that she noticed art can actually heal to a point. Maria also painted famous seahorses in different landmarks near businesses, and there's one situation where she received quite a lot of thanks from a business owner because people actually wanted to have their picture taken by the actual painting of a seahorse, which was near the business, which was actually helping out the business. She's been painting seahorses actually around the world. It seems to be actually connecting people, and she's made a film called Seahorse Symphony. The last artist, Jazz Razul, and he actually works with people on transforming their skills into a positive form. Jazz spoke about his transition model, which has 3 processes, where the first is awaken, and then collaborate and transform, which then turns into ACT. Here on this model, it's basically 3 wheels, and it's a working wheel where each wheel spends time building up momentum and spin onto another wheel. And in order to be creative and have intent, we must produce and then transform things. And he went on to explain a bit about the awakening cycle, like connecting better with yourself and the world around you, hence what the artist Maria explained about her situation and about her art. But he also moved on to explaining actually half of the wheel. He cut each wheel in half. Half that wheel was on waking up first before being awake, I suppose. He then moved on to the collaboration cycle, where he explained on the use of committing to collaborate with others. And half that cycle is cooperation and building the trust of people. But he felt that this will only work if there was commitment. But if that worked, it would lead on to bigger things, as to influencing the world as a whole in itself. And this is not an easy thing to do. Just warned on avoiding the competitive cycle, which is where instead of going forward in the cycle, you actually go in reverse, which, as we know, is backward. Remember the things we need to contribute. And the last cycle was on the transforming cycle. But half that cycle is planning. But after a while, this turns into action, and if done well, it can actually lead to what we call impact. And if that is done really well, then it can lead to another spin of the cycle. After the explanations and talks on the different projects, I actually got involved in the event with the artists and students, where we participated in several group workshops. One was actually writing a word or a phrase that can relate to the community in which we were drawn to. We then used the words or phrases of other artists to make a story. We then moved on to learning about basically our abilities and talents, and learning about other people's talents who are opposite from us, but also open up room for learning from our own weaknesses, and vice versa for them. And the last section of that talk and group sessions was connecting with each other through a web of yarn, and each with a different colour, texture and length. Overall, I enjoyed the event, and to be honest, this was the students' final projects before they graduated, and I wish them well with their future projects on pushing the boundaries of art, using art to make a statement or for activism, help raising awareness with art, and most importantly experiencing creativity in their lives where art helps them in their journey. Thank you for listening.